Check out this week's episode of Chopping It Up with Buck. This week we have a great special guest. She's Oakland Raiders Princess of Darkness, Amy Trask. So welcome to another episode of Chopping It Up with Buck. I'm so happy that we have Amy Trask, the former CEO of the Oakland Raiders, currently with CBS Sports, but also Amy, just, her book is so great. You Negotiate Like a Girl. I read it all and was sending Amy texts and emails while I was reading it. It was just so good to kind of get an insight on you, Amy, and then also your rise in the profession of the NFL, but also your time with Al Davis, because I think it was just really insightful. So many people talk about the Raiders, but not many people know them like you do.
Well, to begin, thank you for having me on. It is a privilege and a pleasure to join you. And let's talk about whatever the heck you want to talk about. But as to your reference to Al, thank you for that. And thank you for the reference to the book and for reading it, of course. And, I say all the time to people, and because I know that some who follow you and listen to you and enjoy your work love the Raiders. Some can't stand the Raiders. Some loved Al. Some couldn't stand Al. But I think if we're all being intellectually honest about this, whether you're a fan of his or not, a fan of the teams or not, this is someone who hired without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, or any other individuality, which has no bearing whatsoever on whether someone can do a job, decades before other people thought to do this. And, I've long felt he doesn't get enough love for having done what he did. And the fact is, he didn't want any love for it. Whenever I would raise that issue, he'd say to me, "Hey, let me get something straight with you. I didn't do it to get attention. I did it because it was the right thing to do."
Well, Amy, you bring me to something, and we'll talk about your life, but it's interesting. Right before I got on, I was reading about the owner's vote on resolution to incentivize minority hiring for head coaches and GMs. And I think it's almost disingenuous if I read it. The Rooney Rule I know came into existence, and I know there has to be something that happens. And I've always told people this, and you can attest to this from being with the Raiders, Art Shell, the first African-American head coach. I mean, so many different things. You as a female getting an opportunity to be the Princess of Darkness that they refer to you as with the Raiders fans, and going out in the stands. And we'll talk about all that. But sometimes when I just read this week, and each time I look at it, it just seems to be more and more disingenuous, because it almost seems like, hey, all 32 of us, we need to be held accountable. Well, you do that. You can do that, and you've been in those meetings and you've been in those situations, so you have a lot more insight on that, being, a female, but also in those discussions. So, I mean, what do you kind of feel about that? I know the Rooney Rule had to have its place, but this new kind of incentive, the way they're trying to incentivize, I just don't feel good with how they're going about this.
Well, what stumps me, and it has long stumped me, and if I knew the answer to this, I would be shouting it from the rooftops. But how do you get people to do what is right? How do you get people to do the right thing? Do you punish them if they don't do? If they don't, do you reward them if they do? People should not need to be incentivized to do the right thing, or to be, I don't know the answer. This is my sort of babbling way of saying, I don't know what the answer is. And look, I've had the privilege of working for men, Al Davis, now Ice Cube and Jeff Quantinitz with the Big Three, who do the right thing because that's the type of men they are. And I've worked with so many people like that. I don't know what the answer is to how you get people to do the right thing, but I know we need to figure it out.
Yeah, and this is a progressive conversation. I think you and I know we met through Twitter. We know a lot of the same people, but I think the thing with you that I've always liked, and just reading your book, it talks about how direct you are. And I think you don't get to the level that you got to by allowing people to walk over you. So that's going to be a conversation we'll continue to have throughout time. And I know I'll have to have you back on. I think the one thing that I'm intrigued by is your background. Your mother Sel, I love that she told you, to thine own self be true. And I think that's so impactful. And for a woman who was very smart and brilliant, it sounds like she wasn't given the opportunity. But I love in the book how you talked about her affection for Al Davis because of the opportunity that you were provided, not because it was given to you. You were a highly educated woman coming out of Cal, went to USC, unfortunately, but good thing for law. And then you got a chance to work with the Raiders. So tell us a little bit about your mother and the influence I know that she and your father had on you.
Sure. And just so you know, my football allegiance at the collegiate level is entirely with Cal. So let's just be clear about that. And and it's funny because when you do go to a graduate school where there is a big football program, what I found is that everyone in graduate school who went somewhere as an undergrad with a football program stayed loyal to their undergrad. It was only the kids that were there who didn't have an undergrad football program. But I digress. Yes, you and I have swum in the same ocean for a very, very long time, and I'm thrilled that we're now in direct communication, and I look forward to continuing to have these conversations with you. And you reference that I'm very direct. I've been told throughout my life that I'm direct to a fault. I don't think there is such a thing as direct to a fault. I don't think it is wrong to be direct, and I don't think there is such a thing as being too direct or direct to a fault. Or let me state it differently. If there is such a thing as being direct to a fault, I'm okay with that. As to my mom, I don't know if you heard me laugh a little bit when you referenced the fact that she told me from the time I was a little kid, to thine own self be true, because as moms can, and as moms do, she repeated that over and over and over again. And I rolled my eyes because that's what kids do when their moms repeat themselves. And you know what? It wasn't until I was almost out of college that I learned, and I don't know why the heck I'm admitting this again, but it wasn't until I was almost out of college that I learned that my mom didn't invent that. She was quoting Shakespeare. So I was a little slow to pick that up. I've been slow on a lot of things throughout life, but it is the best advice I've ever received. You can't lead, in my view, if you are not true to who you are. Pretending you're someone or something you are not, I don't believe is a recipe for success.
Well, Amy, you talk. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you were talking about that being a troublemaker, and when you were growing up, you had a teacher that really was direct with you. It seemed like when you have people that really show you that you can be something. I think your mom was also an advocate for you. I think when you were younger, similar to me. I mean, we've had influences or people that weren't on our side that said you weren't going to be anything, you weren't going to amount to anything. I think it was interesting to hear that, and then juxtapose that to the teacher that told you, that challenged you and got you to think that you could do something, and you were then able to do well in school and move away from so much of the troublemaker label.
Well, the adage that a teacher can change a life is absolutely true, and I experienced that. My 6th grade teacher called my mom in, and within earshot of me, I was outside the room, but those big windows were open and I could hear every word. He told my mom, I know your other 2 kids are very smart. This one, not so smart. And he told my mom that I would never, ever make it to college. And first of all, why are you labeling a child in the 6th grade? And why are you, it's, as I look back on that, it's sort of crazy that he would do that, let alone in a manner where I could hear him. But I also got to hear my mom respond to him. And as my mom let him have it and said, how dare you label any child? How dare you declare of any child at this age what he or she is capable of? That felt really good. Like, okay, maybe my mom thinks I can figure this out. And I was a problem. I was labeled a behavior problem in kindergarten. In kindergarten, my mom was called in and she was told this is a behavior problem, or she's a behavior problem. And that label stuck with me throughout school. Some people would say it's still appropriate. And by the way, that might be why Al and I worked together so well. We were both troublemakers, and I think he might have liked that about me. But the
Yeah.
teacher you're referring to, and I spoke of her in the book, was Mrs. Hernandez. And I said, it's funny, her name's Jean Hernandez. Still at this age, I still think back on her, and she terrifies me, and I call her Mrs. Hernandez. It was my first day of 10th grade English, and she looked at me, and it was my first couple of days, and she pointed her finger at me, and she pointed me out into the hallway. And basically what she did is articulate to me, I'm not going to take your crap. She didn't say it quite that way, but that was the message. And she let me know from that point on, she was going to hold me to a standard to which I'd never held myself. And she was going to ask me to accomplish things I never believed I could accomplish. And she changed the trajectory of my life.
Well, Amy, it's great to hear that story. I know in 7th grade, I was at the gym, a basketball game, and the coach just told me to give me his shoes and socks. So my mother was a lioness too. She went in and read him the riot act. And then in English in high school, Miss Paula J., who was probably about 5'1", she got on me really well by like all the red marks on your paper. So she said, you're too smart for this. I got to make sure I get you going in the right direction. So I know exactly what you mean when you have teachers and coaches and people that believe in you. And I think it's interesting when you talk about your mom and the things that she was able to instill in you, as well as your dad. It seemed like your family, you grew up loving football from an early age. You really got into football and just started to, just understand the X's and O's, but also the game itself.
Well, before I dive into that, and I certainly will, I will just say it sounds like you and I had 3 very parallel experiences in that regard. The person, in my case, 6th grade teacher, in your case, coach, who told us, they're not going to accomplish anything. Mothers who defended us and were lionesses, as you said, don't you mess with my cub. And then the teachers who said, no, you're capable of more than you think you're capable of accomplishing. So that's really interesting that we had those 3 parallels. Yeah. And here's to your mom and my mom and all the moms that do that for their children, and the dads, of course. Yeah. I'm referencing moms only because in our discussion, it was our moms. Look, I do love football. I fell in love with the game of football when I was in junior high. And I didn't come from a family of crazy football people. They watched the Super Bowl every year. I went to a Super Bowl party, had a Super Bowl party, but they weren't real football fans. I fell in love with the game because it is what I would liken to a game of chess. It is a very, very cerebral game of matchups. How do I best position my players so that they best match up against your players? How can I exploit your weaknesses? What do I do to keep you from exploiting mine? It's like high-speed chess played by very, very, very large, fast chess pieces. And I fell in love with the game in junior high.
It's interesting. I think the other thing, what team did you love? Being in LA and having the Rams, what was your team growing up? Who did you?
Well, I didn't really have a team I loved growing up. I did for, holidays, birthday presents, things like that. My gift to my dad was always tickets to a Ram game as I got old enough that I was able to buy those kind of gifts and do those sorts of things, because then it was Dad and Amy going to the Rams game together. But I got to go, and he loved it because we went together. So maybe I bought us both a gift when I really think back on it. But
you were getting yourself a gift.
It was the gift of time, right? Yeah, but I fell in love with the Raiders when I went up to Berkeley. I was a student at Cal. The Raiders at the time were just down the road in Oakland. I wasn't with the team when it was in Oakland. I didn't join the team till after Al had moved it to LA, and then I was with the team when he moved it back. But I fell in love with everything about the Raiders. I mean, this was a team and a team owner that just sang to me. It didn't matter if you were a behavior problem. Come on, if you can contribute, you can contribute. Al gave second chances, and I would say in many cases, third and fourth and fifth chances to people that other teams had labeled behavior problems. And that resonated with me. And just everything about the ethos of the team and its owner, Al, I just felt like this is my team. And then when I graduated Cal and moved to LA, it was about the same time the team moved back. It was actually, the team had tried to move earlier, but was ordered back by the court. And then ultimately the year I came down, the team came down. And I thought, well, look at this. My team's coming with me.
Well, Amy, it's interesting. I was an Oilers fan growing up, but I highly respected the Raiders, especially when the Oilers got Ken Stabler. It's just a lot of when you watch AFC football, you understand the Raiders. I'll tell
Yep.
you, I went to UCLA. I really wanted to be a Raider. You guys never seemed to be interested in me, but I was always fascinated with you guys. And quite funny story, my first NFL game ever, we played you guys in London in '90. I was with
I was there.
with the New Orleans Saints. And I had a really good game because I'm like, okay, if I get cut by the Saints, maybe the Raiders will pick me up. And sure enough, I ended up with the Colts. But yeah, I always liked that Raider mentality. I mean, I was an Oilers fan, but you couldn't help but respect the Raiders because if we couldn't beat Pittsburgh, maybe you guys could.
Well, yeah, I mean, all those AFC rivalries, having spent my entire almost 30 years in the league with the Raiders, so AFC the whole time, but the Oilers and, boy, a lot of games to remember.
Well, Amy, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back. We're chopping it up with Buck right after this.
Many people are looking for natural alternatives to help ease their aches and pains. Begin stopping the pain with the help of Pain Stopper. Formulated by healthcare providers, Pain Stopper helps alleviate a variety of physical ailments so you can get back to doing what you love.
Our products are triple independently lab tested to ensure the highest quality hemp available.
Visit PainStopCBD.com for more information. Pain Stopper, because why manage pain when you can stop it?
At Heslop Wealth Advisors, our goal is to help small businesses develop quality retirement plans for their employees through our Lunch and Learn seminars. We provide lunch and learning tools to help your company succeed and unmatched customer service.
Welcome back to Chopping It Up with Buck. We have Amy Trapp, the former CEO of the Oakland Raiders. Now, you talked about joining as an intern, and this is a great story for people that talk about, well, I just need things to be right. You actually just said, I'm calling the Raiders, and I'm going to, I want to be a part of this organization. Tell people about that, because I think that's fascinating, and not enough people do that to really, if you want something, you actually go and get it the best way you see fit.
Sure. And, I'll start by saying I recognize the tremendous fortune and privilege, if you will, I had, or luxury I had, of being able to do an internship without being compensated, because I'm absolutely positively aware that not everybody has the ability to do that. So when I talk about my internship, I'm very quick to note that I recognize how fortunate I was to be able to do what I did, which is I was in school full time, picked up the phone, called the Raiders. They were now in Los Angeles, as was I. And I said, I'd like to do an internship. And the gentleman to whom my call was connected said very gruffly, "What's that?" And I said, well, I'll work for you and you won't pay me. And he said, "Come on down." So, that started my internship. And again, I recognize not everyone has the good fortune to be able to say, I'll do something for no pay. The good news is now in these modern times, they have to pay you. So that's the good news for kids today, or they have to give you school credit or some such thing. But the lesson I will share that I believe applies to everybody, no matter whether you're working for pay or for school credit, is do everything you possibly can, help in any way you possibly can, contribute in any manner you can, and don't stand on ceremony. Don't think, well, I'm a grad student, I shouldn't have to do X or Y or Z. Let me tell you something. If my responsibility was standing on the sideline and picking up the scrunched up Gatorade cups that the players threw down as they ran back on the field, I would have been thrilled to do that. I walked around the building and I said, how can I help? How can I help? So I would go in on Saturdays and I would say, I'll alphabetize the will call envelopes. Or let me help you with that Xeroxing of the will call list. Learn everything you can, contribute in any way you can. The worst words I could ever hear from an employee during my years were, "It's not my job." No, let me tell you something. When you're a teammate, everything is your job. If you're the right guard and the right tackle is having trouble, you know what? Go
Pick
help.
him up. Yeah, pick him up.
Go
Yeah.
help. If
Yeah.
you're the safety and you see that the corner is struggling, well, you're going to help. You're going to provide additional coverage. So, if you're a teammate, or let me state it differently, don't give me the gibberish, I'm a teammate, if you're not going to act like a teammate. Because what do teammates do? Teammates help their team.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think when you initially got there and once you started moving up the ladder, the one thing I liked about your book, and you made reference to this a lot, you weren't looking for the next position. You were just working hard because you really knew that was going to get you to move forward in that profession. But it seemed like you pissed a lot of people off when you first got there. They didn't like you coming into the ticket office early on. They didn't like you trying to get office meetings. I know you talked a little bit about that in the book, that the Raiders culture was not one where you had, meetings of all of the different places. So you worked in silos, but it still sounded like you were able to get them to kind of get to a point where everybody could work and be better teammates with each other.
Well, thank you. And I believe I did. And you're absolutely right. In so doing, I angered a lot of people. Now, in part, it was because of what I was doing. But as I grew up, I realized I could have done it more gracefully. I was me. I was a bull in the china shop in many regards. And so what I did, I believe, was the right thing to do. In retrospect, I could have done it in a manner that might have been a bit more graceful, a bit more tactful. But look, I grew up on the job and I made a lot of mistakes as I grew up. But how I found out that people thought, well, I'll state it differently. At one point, someone said to me, Al's not going to like the fact that you're walking around and you're going to the ticket office and you're going to the personnel department and you're going to the scouting department and you're going to the finance department. Al's not going to like it. Al's not going to like it. And I just listened and said, I heard you. Well, very, very shortly thereafter, I was walking up the staircase. He was walking down the staircase and he stopped me. And he said, where are we on ticket sales for this week's game? And here I was at this point, a full-time employee, but brand new full-time employee in the legal department. And what that told me is, he knew what I was doing. He had been told I was going from department to department. And by asking me as simply as he did, where are we on ticket sales? What that told me is he wasn't bothered that I was doing it. Well, it told me three things. One, he knew I was doing it. Two, he wasn't bothered that I was doing it. And three, I damn well better know the answer to the questions.
Yeah, that's right. He's asking you the question because he knows. I think the biggest thing is people always say they know Al Davis, and you had the intimate working knowledge with him. You say he's brilliant and he has a way of talking to you, whether it's with nice words, but usually not so nice words. But it seemed like he gave you a lot of latitude to do the things that you could do with that organization, but also you guys could battle each other, and then it wasn't one of those things where tell me, what's one of your best Al Davis memories? For people that kind of think they know Al, you were right there next to him. What are some of those memories, or one of the best memories you have of Al Davis?
Well, you are right. The biggest misconception about Al is that he wouldn't tolerate those who disagreed with him, or he wouldn't tolerate disagreement. If that were the case, I'd have been fired about 2 weeks into my job when I told him he was wrong and we had a big argument.
How did you do that? What gave you the gumption to do that, Amy?
I just did. That's just me. I mean, I was sitting in a room with a coworker. Al walked in, and Al tore into this coworker about something that had happened that day. And it was like, I can only imagine a velociraptor would tear into flesh. And then as I listened, I realized he was wrong. And so after it went on for a few minutes, and this employee, this gentleman, I mean, the blood had drained from his face. He looked horrified. And I was listening to Al, and I realized he was wrong. So I just said, and really, I'd been there roughly 2 weeks. I said, excuse me, you're wrong. And he turned and looked at me. It was like his head swiveled like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, only there was no green stuff coming out. He looked at me, and I said, you're wrong, and here's why. And he yelled, and I yelled, and he yelled. And I said, look, if the underlying facts were as you believe them to be, your conclusion is fair. But those aren't the underlying facts. you're basing your conclusion on wrong information. And he yelled and I yelled and he yelled and I yelled. And look, I don't have a dainty voice under the best of circumstances, nor does he. So we were talking loudly and yelling, but it was a yelling discussion, if you will. And at the end of about, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, no, it was more than 10, 15, 20 minutes, he looked at me and he's like, oh, okay. I gotcha. He understood the point and that he was wrong because the facts on which he was basing his premise were wrong. And that set the tone for an almost 30-year working relationship in which I never hesitated to disagree with him. And I will tell you, we disagreed more than we agreed. But at the end of the day, I recognized he owned the business. I did not. So my responsibility was to tell him when I thought he was wrong, to support my argument, to try to change his mind. And when I couldn't change his mind, to understand it was his decision to make, and it was my responsibility to do the best I could with that decision. But to your question about my favorite memory, there are so many, and I'm actually tearing up right now. I've got a lump in my throat. I don't know if you can tell, but
oh yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, that's
I'll give you one.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
give you one.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you one. I just like, if I start crying in the middle, I want you to understand why.
Okay.
Well, okay, so here's a very, very special one, and it goes to the issue of hiring without regard to these individualities, which have no bearing on whether one can do a job, as we started out our conversation discussing. We were having a meeting with a business that we were looking to do business with, and I asked Al to join the meeting. And so the business we were meeting with came in, and there were a few representatives of that business, one of whom was a woman, and Al walks in shortly. And he's being very gracious and introducing himself. And he says to the woman, you know, look, I try very, very hard not to swear in front of women. And I look at all my coworkers like, did he just say that? Did he actually just say he tries not to swear? I mean, I was looking at them. I was incredulous that he would say that. And then he goes on and says to this woman, and even if I do slip up and I swear in front of you, I want you to know I never, ever swear at women. Well, now I'm so incredulous because all he did was swear at me. I'm so incredulous. My pen goes flying out of my hand, lands on the table with a thump on the conference table. And he looks over and sees the look on my face. And then he says, oh, Amy, I swear at Amy, but I don't consider her a woman. And that was the most superb compliment he could pay me, that he evaluated my work without regard to my gender.
Yeah, that's a great story. And see, those are the things that I think people don't get to see. I think Gene Upshaw also had something that was interesting. You got so many great Raiders, Willie Brown, Lester. I mean, the list is endless, even now and then, the Raider tradition. But I love the fact that Gene Upshaw says she's not a girl, she's a Raider. I guess somebody was telling him, you find her in practice, what's it like having a girl working for the team? And he just says, no, she's not a girl, she's a Raider. And I think
my heart popped then, and my heart is popping now listening to you talk about that. And Gene was just a giant of a man. And as phenomenal a football player was, he was an even more tremendous man, sensational on the field, spectacular off the field, just a phenomenal, phenomenal human being. And I miss him, and so many people miss him. And the league misses him.
Yeah. Well, you know, Amy, the one thing I do like, and I remember this quote, and it stood out to me, because I remember when this was happening for a guy that we both, you know, I know Richard from his career. You know him pretty well. But if Richard Sherman is a thug, then I'm proud to call myself a thug. And I thought that was interesting because sometimes people don't stand up for others, but for all those that don't know, and most should, Richard Sherman is a very intelligent guy, went to Stanford, one of the most cerebral players that you talk about, and he speaks his mind. And I think that's the one thing when you said that, I like that, and that made me respect it more. But I could understand because, like you saying, coming from that Raider culture where you give guys second chances, that was apropos for the people that don't know Richard Smith.
Well,
Richard Sherman, excuse me.
And let's talk about Richard Sherman. Salutatorian in high school. Went to Stanford, and for those who don't know, and yes, I'm a cowgirl about to give Stanford all kinds of love. went to
That's hard to
Stanford.
do. That's hard to do.
It is. Stanford doesn't in any way grade adjust to allow in football players. So Richard Sherman, salutatorian in high school, gets into Stanford. While he still had football eligibility remaining, he started working on a master's degree because he had already gotten his bachelor's degree, still had eligibility remaining, so began work on a master's at Stanford. He is so smart and so articulate, and it just drives me nuts when I hear people say, well, he's a thug, and that's quieted down a bit. But there was a period of time where people were hurling all sorts of horrible accusations at him, and I was passionate about it. I said, you know what? If you want to call him a thug, well, then you call me a thug too, because I would be proud to be considered a thug like Richard Sherman. At some point, people, need to, and I'm saying this like at some point. The point is now. The point was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, whenever the human species started. Stop judging people on their appearance, on their ethnicity, their race, their religion, their hairstyle, whether they're old, young, male, female, fat, skinny. Just judge the person.
That's good stuff right there, Amy. The one thing I also like what you said too, and this is the coaches, because I think this is so underrated in the coaching profession, is some coaches talk about their system versus their players. And I think that's one thing you got an up close and personal thing with, along with general managers. Some general managers say, well, I have to have my guy.
You're singing to the choir now. And you know this as well as I do. What do the best coaches do? The best coaches take their players and best position them to be their best. They don't take a player and try to shove him into a system for which he's not well suited. They tailor a system around their players. And the analogy I use for non-football fans is, if you're a choir director and you are asking an alto to sing soprano, A, you're dumb, but B, don't be surprised when the music doesn't sound good. Why would you ask an alto to sing soprano? You wouldn't. Football is the same. Maximize their skills. And this whole concept of my guy, my guy, my guy. Let me tell you something. If I'm a general manager and I take a job at a team and Bill Belichick is my head coach, guess what? He's my guy, because I want the best. I don't need to be proprietary. I don't need my fingerprints on something. I just want the best.
You got it every day from being around the Raiders organization. I love the conversations in the book because, I always want to hear people's stories, but I also love the fact that, Al was teaching you. I mean, he was a coach before he became a football executive. He was a scout. He knew every part of the organization from a football side. But I think the interesting thing is when you guys would argue, or he would tell you, not argue, but you'd have conversations and they would be pretty good about, hey, you don't need to send extra people on the blitz. So the defensive coordinator was getting reamed that week, or the OC didn't do something right, so he was going to get reamed that week. How did you kind of talk him off the ledge? Because he might have got upset and said, hey, I need to just go get my projector and fire this guy.
Al did have a propensity to go through coaches rather rapidly, and I will tell you, but for some of those discussions, he'd have gone through a lot more. But I hid that projector. After he used that projector that one time, I didn't even know we had a projector like that, but I hid that baby. He was very, very passionate, and you're right. His background was football. This isn't someone, Al didn't inherit his team. It wasn't handed down to him by his dad or his granddad, or he didn't earn his money in another area, as many do, and then buy a team and have to learn football. This is a man who is a Hall of Fame coach. And, he's in the Hall of Fame for many reasons, but one of the things he did was coach. So he knew football. And to your point, there was never, ever a time where I asked him an X's and O's question that he didn't take the time to go over it with me. And even when he was sitting with men like Bill Walsh, for example, and the two of them were talking X's and O's, and I had the privilege and pleasure of sitting with them, every question I asked, those two men answered. They never hesitated to share knowledge. But to your point about the defensive coordinator thing, I would sometimes say to him, send them all, just to kind of rile him up, because he'd be annoyed that we sent someone, we sent extra men in a given situation and it didn't work. And I would look at him and say, send them all, send them. And he would just look at me. And there were times I would say to him, well, if I was the defensive coordinator, and he would stop me dead in my tracks and say, you're not.
Well, Amy, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back. We're chopping it up with Buck right after this.
Many people are looking for natural alternatives to help ease their aches and pains. Begin stopping the pain with the help of Pain Stopper. Formulated by healthcare providers, Pain Stopper helps alleviate a variety of physical ailments so you can get back to doing what you love.
Our products are triple independently lab tested to ensure the highest quality hemp available.
Visit PainStopCBD.com for more information. Pain Stopper, because why manage pain when you can stop it?
How you guys doing? It's Artavis Scott here. The reason why I like Thin Energy is because I need to be at my peak performance no matter what I do. Big sports drink for me, keep it going, keeping myself up. It gets me on top of my game, extra boost that I need to keep it going in the fourth quarter. Working out, definitely a good drink for you to have. All the good nutrition that you need inside of it. Passion fruit, it's my favorite one. It's not just for professional athletes, it's for everyone. And I definitely can say it definitely works in the office or in the weight room, wherever you may be. You can go to thinenergy.com, tell them I sent you, and get you a drink. Thin Energy, the healthy alternative. Drink it, live it. See, when I got something like that, I can just go. No sugar, no crash.
Welcome back to Chopping It Up with Buck. We have Amy Trask. We'll just call her all around everything. So information to come our way, we'll make sure we reach out to Amy. Amy, I got a couple of more Raider questions, but I also have to talk to you about the Big Three, which I think is fascinating once we're able to start playing that again. But I really love the fact that Apollo 13 quote you have, failure is not an option, with Gene Kranz, played by the great Ed Harris. You watched the movie and then said, hey, we got to have a Raiders field trip. I'm always curious, and you talked about it a little bit. Did those folks go, and how did they receive the movie after you got so excited about giving them the option to understand what they needed to do as an organization?
Well, I saw Apollo 13 right when it came out. It is, to this date, my favorite movie. And what's fascinating is we went into the movie knowing how the story ends. This was history. We knew how it ended, but it was an absolutely riveting movie. And I thought it was just a tremendous, tremendous display of teamwork and working together to solve a problem. That the scene you referenced, when Ed Harris walks into that room and seated around a table are the individuals at NASA who had been working on that project, and he dumps onto the table a bucket of, bolts and pieces and parts and says, this is all those men have with them in space. Using only these things, find a way to get them down alive. And I'm not quoting him exactly, but that's how he said it. And it was so powerful. And so Monday morning, I go into the office, and I want you to know, I had no authority whatsoever to do what I did. I was not the chief executive. I was, a staff member, a team member. I had zero authority to do what I did. I didn't even think about that. It never occurred to me, well, Aim, maybe you shouldn't do this, or maybe you're not allowed to do this, or, what are you doing? Think these things through. I just was, as my mom would tell me to be, to thine own self be true. And I was true to myself. And I went running in. I said, I want everyone to go see this movie. I want you to go see it right now. There's a matinee. It starts, in a few hours down the road. I will do everyone's job for you. I will cover the phones. I will cover the ticket office. I will cover the finance department. I will do everyone's jobs. Go to the movie. And the Raiders are buying the tickets. I had no authority to do that either. And I said, and we'll buy snacks too. The Raiders will buy the snacks too. I had no authority to do that either. So A, I told everyone they could take a few hours off to go to the movie. B, I told them we'd buy the tickets. And C, I said we'd buy snacks. Zero authority to do any of that. And almost everyone, I went running around. There was no email back then. There was no, Twitter or social media. I couldn't email people, tweet them, Snapchat, Instagram, nothing. I had to run from office to office. We had 3 buildings, and most people went. So they're at the movies, and a little while later, Al's secretary, who chose not to go, says to me, Al's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. And apparently he had called in, and he had said, let me talk to so-and-so. Well, he's not here, Mr. Davis. Well, let me talk to so-and-so. Well, he's not here, Mr. Davis. And this went on 3 or 4 people. And finally he said, the assistant said to Al, Amy sent everyone to the movies. And Al's response was, let me talk to Amy.
Oh.
So they put him on the phone with me, and I explained what I did. I said, I sent everyone to the movies, and this is why. And I told him about that scene with Ed Harris. And I told him about a few other things, when Ed Harris says that we've never lost a man in space. We're not losing one on my watch. I told him about the whole movie and why I was so excited, and that I sent everyone. And his response to me was, that sounds like a great movie. I want to see that. So he wasn't angry. He understood why I did what I did. I mean, I had gutted the building. I sent his whole staff to a movie without asking permission. And his only response was, that sounds like a great movie. And then I went ahead and told him we bought the tickets and we bought the snacks as well. But, another instance where people would have assumed he would have just gone nuts, that someone without any authority whatsoever to send the entire staff to a matinee did so and agreed to pay for the tickets, or offered to pay for the tickets and the snacks. But his response was, that sounds like a great movie.
You made me watch the clip the other day, and the part that I forgot, because I remember him going in, but then but I love the part where he said, I want you to call every manufacturer and not know what the part does, but everything it can do, because that's all they have. And you talk about goosebumps, movies do that for you. And it made me watch, and I was like, whoa, I was blown away, because it's so true. We knew the outcome of it, but the story behind it was so great. And
to the point we started with at the outset of this conversation, and I use this point a lot when I'm speaking to people about being open-minded and hiring based solely on merit without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, or any other individuality, which has no bearing on whether one can do a job. Do you think anyone in that space capsules, in Apollo 13, gave a damn who was sitting around that table?
Not
trying
at all.
to figure out all they wanted to do was get back to Earth alive. And I don't think it mattered one little bit to them who the person was or who the people were that figured out how to get them back to Earth alive. They didn't care how old they were, their gender, their race, their religion, their ethnicity. None of that mattered. Just get me back alive.
Yeah. Well, I think Hidden Figures did the same thing when, Katherine Johnson, who was a mathematician, and the astronauts were like, no, I want her in the room telling you guys what to do, which is it's fascinating to that point. And you're right. Whoever can do it, let's put them in the position to make plays. Like you always say,
exactly.
Hey, I got to ask.
Make a play.
Make a play. Speaking of plays, the Tuck Rule game. That's a subject for all Raider fans. I got to know what your thoughts were, because I bet you were celebrating. I read that you were celebrating, but tell us about between the time of them making the call and then within the 2-minute warning, you have to go into up in the booth. What was the emotion from the high to the low on that decision?
Well, you're so wise, of course, to point out that this was within 2 minutes, because had it been outside of 2 minutes, and it was only inside the 2-minute warning by a few seconds, had it been outside the 2-minute warning, game over, because New England had no timeouts left, and New England could not have challenged the call, so it would have been our ball. And, you talk about football, and as you know, we often hear it's a game of seconds and a game of inches. And in that instance, the difference in a few seconds was the difference in that call being overturned and not being overturned. And, the other thing that just irked me about it is the standard was supposed to be indisputable visual evidence. Well, we're still disputing this umpteen decades later. So, by definition, it wasn't indisputable. But, my reaction, and there's a funny story as to the reaction, because when I realized and I was watching with the Raider staff in a section of the press box in Foxborough, and you're not allowed to cheer in the press box. So when we believed that we had recovered the fumble, we were all grabbing one another's hands and squeezing one another's hands because we couldn't yell and we couldn't cheer. So when I all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, they're reviewing this call, I turned around and I said something to the then director of officiating, who was sitting right behind me. And Mike Silver reported years later in an article in Sports Illustrated that I said to him, you better call 911, because if you overturn this blanking call, I'm going to have a blanking heart attack. Well, when I read that, I said to my husband, I didn't say that. I did not say that. This is bad reporting. I didn't say that. I'm calling Sports Illustrated. And my husband, played with me a little bit. He's like, you're right. I was sitting right there with you. You didn't say that. And I said, I knew I didn't say that. And I'm getting all het up. And he says, but before you call Sports Illustrated, let me tell you what you did say. What you did say was, you better call 911, because if you overturn this blanking call, only I didn't say blanking, this blanking call, I'm going to have a blanking stroke. So the only difference in what I said was stroke versus heart attack. So I looked at him and I said, oh yeah, I better let it go. But yeah, I was incredulous. Buck, I was incredulous. I'm like, if you really call 911, because if you overturn this call, I'm going to have a blanking stroke. I could not believe it was being reviewed.
Yeah. Even after all these years, I'm not saying this because I have you on. But that was a fumble. We can say, and I know people go back and forth between the Raider fans and the Patriots fans, and it kind of started them on their trajectory too. It was a fumble.
I will say this to all the people who tell me all the time, and when they listen to this, they will say, get over it, get over it. Look, the fun of sports is we don't have to get over it. Exactly. There are all sorts of things in life we need to get over. The fun of sports is you don't have to get over things. You do have to be a good sport. So as long as we do this in good fun and good spirit and the spirit of sportsmanship, we don't have to get over it.
Well, I commiserated with Raider fans because as an Oiler fan, we can never beat Pittsburgh, right? And so Renfro caught that pass in the back of the end zone. The first Steelers fans say no, they didn't. And Eric Affolter at USC didn't catch that pass against them in '87. But
right, and you don't have to get over it.
No, I'm never going to get over it. Never. Well, Amy, the other thing is, as you transition from the Raiders, tell us a little bit about your career after leaving the Raiders. And, you're doing Big Three, you're CBS Sports. You've got a lot of things and a lot of interest now. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's helped you as you progress from your long career and long tenured career with the Raiders.
Well, leaving the Raiders was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. And yes, I recognize that shows what a very, very tremendous life I have had thus far. If that's the hardest decision I ever have to make, then I am an extremely, extremely fortunate person. And I understand that. But it was an excruciating decision and I agonized over it. And at one point, I realized I'm not even going to be able to think about what I want to do next until I make this decision. And the morning after I explained to the team owner, I gave notice, I said, I'm leaving. I woke up the next morning and I looked at my husband and I said, I have nothing to do. I am a blight on humanity. And we laughed. And not too long thereafter, the opportunity was presented to me to join CBS Sports. And, I'll share what I'm about to share in hopes that if there are some, not only women, but men who are listening to this who have insecurities, as I did, that look, I faced my greatest insecurity. My greatest insecurity has always been my physical appearance. And that stems back to the time that I was a child. And look, we can argue whether it's legitimate or not legitimate. That's not the point. Insecurities are insecurities and everybody has them. I had, and still have, by the way, a tremendous insecurity about my physical appearance. So I didn't want to do it. And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. And finally, someone I know looked at me, and this wasn't a best friend. This wasn't someone who I'd been, not a bestie, but someone in a circle of friends. And she looked at me and she just said, very quietly, let it go.
Hmm.
And that resonated with me. And I said yes to CBS Sports. And that was just, the leaving the Raiders was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was the right decision, absolutely the right decision. Joining CBS Sports was hard, not as hard, but also the right decision. And I am conquering my biggest insecurity every time I go on camera. So that's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. The teammates that I have at CBS Sports are magnificent. You don't have to be on a sports team to have teammates. My CBS Sports teammates are magnificent, and I'm very honest. I've been very honest with them about my insecurities, and they do everything they can to help me, and they're just phenomenal teammates. And then, joining Ice Cube and Jeff Quantinitz with the Big Three, as I said earlier, what a lucky girl I am to have worked with men like Al, and now with Cube and Jeff and CBS. It's tremendous good fortune.
Yeah, the one thing about Al, what do you miss most about him, Amy? I know you spend a lot of time.
Everything.
Yeah, just what are a couple of things you miss? You really.
I miss our quiet conversations, the ones where we would talk. He was very much a student of world affairs. So, yes, I miss our game days together and the X's and O's, but I also I miss some of the world wisdom he would share. He was a very special man, and I miss him.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said too, though, about those young people facing your insecurities. And I think that's one of the real key things we all have to do. And when we get to our truth, we're good with it. My hair is bad right now. I normally wouldn't come on camera. Last week I had a mustache. I don't care. I just love the conversation and hearing your story. And that really resonated with me. And what we always do here, we kind of call it the 2-minute drill. We let you start.
Okay.
But we're in the 2-minute drill now with Chop It Up with Buck. So I've got just a couple of quick questions, nothing long, but we're going to march down the field so we can let you score. So Hells Angels lawsuit. Tell me about that real quick. That was a great one.
Okay. We had done something as an organization where we violated the Hells Angels intellectual property rights. Art Shell became the head coach. Our merchandise department took it upon themselves without clearing it with legal or otherwise to produce a lot of merchandise that said Shell's Angels and used a logo of the Hells Angels. So I got a letter from the attorneys for the Hells Angels. And by the way, this is one of the best law firms in America. The Hells Angels do not mess around when it comes to legal counsel. And I read the letter in which it said, you're violating our intellectual property rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I read the letter and he was right. So I picked up the phone and I called him rather than sending a lawyer letter back, rather than having an argument, rather than trying to muster up some sort of argument to tell him he was wrong. I picked up the phone and I said to him, you're right. And he was silent. I mean, just dead silent for a long time. And he said, I've never in my entire legal career had this experience where I've sent a letter like that and someone has picked up the phone and said, you're right. I said, you're right. What can we do? He said, let me talk to my clients. And he got back and he said, the Hells Angels, we're also impressed with the manner in which you responded, and we don't want to have any harm befall you. So go ahead and sell what you have and then just don't make any more. And he would have been within his absolute legal rights to demand that we destroy all the merchandise on which we'd spent money, but he didn't do that. And it was a good lesson learned, or I don't think I needed to learn it because I did it anyway, but it reinforced my view that when you do something wrong, admit you did something wrong.
Yeah. Well, in true Raider fashion, you guys take off and hit a deep bomb. So we got down almost in the scoring position. So your first down again. Cross-pollination more than synergy. Why is that?
Again, it just goes to an overall concept of teamwork. Every single role within the organization matters. I don't care what your job is. If you're not doing it to the best of your ability, you're not helping your team win. And everything intersects and everything overlaps. And you've got to have cross-pollination between and among everyone in the organization.
In the great Raider tradition, tight end gets it down to the 5-yard line. We got one last one. I know you guys.
I want to run the ball. I'm just telling you
okay,
right
okay.
now.
Well,
if you're listening, Pete Carroll, if you're listening to me, I'm giving the ball to beast mode. I'm running the ball.
So Pitbull or Princess of Darkness? Which one you like better?
Oh, Princess of Darkness. That
At least
was
sure.
that was a name that came out of that same Sports Illustrated article that I spoke about earlier. Mike Silver reported that some team owners or executives told him that behind my back, they called me the Princess of Darkness, and they did not mean that as a compliment. Trust me, that was not a compliment. But you know what? Raider Nation fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. We adopted it. I will cherish that nickname forever. I will use that nickname forever. It is the best nickname I've ever. And I hope, by the way, that you're actually a little afraid of me right now.
Amy, you know, I'm afraid of you, but I see you guys going in the stands in the dog pound, and I know that's the crazier place to be. And I know you spent time there with the doctors, the lawyers, Homeland Security people. You know, people see Raider Nation, they think it's all just craziness. There's some high executives in there too, which is crazy to me, but that's what I love about football. Bringing great people together. Hey, we're so happy that you could join us today. I mean, this was phenomenal. We had a great time, and hope you did too. I know you had to kind of tell the story. You had to go sit in your car, but you bought the water so you could at least see that. We gave you a great view. But I'm so glad you joined us and spent some time with us today.
I mean this as sincerely can be. It was absolutely my privilege and pleasure to join you. I am honored that you invited me. And this was a great conversation that I hope we can enjoy in person when we get through all the current craziness.
Thanks a lot, Amy. I hope you and your family are well and stay blessed. And thanks again for chopping it up with Buck.
And you as well.
Hi, I'm Mike Gardner, founder of Thin Energy, the wellness energy that delivers each and every time.
In 6 weeks that I've been taking Thin Energy, I feel fantastic.
I lost 7 pounds in the first week.
You just squeeze it in, you take a shot, and you're done.
Go get your drinks, get your hype, get you ready.
I feel great.
Jump on, try Thin Energy.
Drink it, live it.
Many people are looking for natural alternatives to help ease their aches and pains. Begin stopping the pain with the help of Pain Stopper. Formulated by healthcare providers, Pain Stopper helps alleviate a variety of physical ailments so you can get back to doing what you love.
Our products are triple independently lab tested to ensure the highest quality hemp available.
Visit painstopcbd.com for more information. Pain Stopper, because why manage pain when you can stop it?
At Heslop Wealth Advisors, our goal is to help small businesses develop quality retirement plans for their employees through our Lunch and Learn seminars. We provide lunch and learning tools to help your company succeed and unmatched customer service.